Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are watching this, or what time of the day you're watching this. I hope you're doing well. We will be covering the New York Times guest essay titled "You're Probably Doing Small Talk Wrong." I will project this on my screen so that we can all be looking at the same text. Let's see. Give me 1 second. Here we go. There we go. So this is a guest essay written by Maya Rosnick Millen and Erica Boothby. I'm sure I'm not pronouncing their names correctly. And they are behavioral scientists. So they are scientists that investigate and study human behaviors. And so it's a very interesting insight. So before we do dive into this reading text, what is small talk? Do you have small talk in your culture? So for example, if you get on the elevator with a stranger, do you just look at the wall? Pretend that person is not there, or do you have a light conversation even though you don't know that person and it's just maybe a few seconds you'll have um you know the elevator to yourselves, right? So for example, if I get on the elevator, uh I'll say something like, "Oh, uh great shoes," or um oh, so such nice weather today. It's kind of a shame to be stuck inside, right? And then that doesn't mean that person has to have a conversation with me. It could just mean that the person might respond, and that was a small talk. So usually, it's very common in American culture. I think it's more so common on the West Coast, like California, than it is in New York, or New Jersey. Um, but I don't know. I don't know if that is part of what you're used to or you found that really strange. I could see why sometimes it's very strange for some people because, like in Korea, for example, you don't really talk to strangers. And I think also it has to do with cell phones. I mean, I think universally, cell phones have changed the way we interact and communicate with other people, regardless of what culture you're coming from. All right, so let's look into this. You're probably doing small talk wrong. There's a moment in human connection that defies easy explanation. So, what is that referring to? There's a moment in human connection, and the connection defies easy explanation. So, what does it mean to defy? Well, don't worry yet if you don't know what it means. You see the little dash here? This is called an M dash. We talked about this in class. And this is supposed to give a definition or more explanation about an idea that came before the M dash, right? So, there's a moment in human connection that defies, oh, sorry, that is moment. Sorry, that in human connection that defies easy uh, explanation. That sudden electric feeling, that's the moment, right? When you meet someone and feel your minds merge, right? So you can't explain it. That's what it means to defy. It goes against, it makes something hard to do. So, for example, when you are on Earth, you are pulled by gravity. So everything has to fall to the ground because of gravity, right? But when you're in space, right, that same principle doesn't apply. And so you could defy gravity. You can go against gravity. Does this make sense? So there's a moment, there's a time when you meet someone, human connection. There's a time um when you have a connection with another human being. And that moment, that is referring to the moment. That moment goes against easy explanation. It's hard to explain, right? So if I have a friend who likes, I don't know, I'm just making this up, knitting, right? Um, I there's a very clear explanation why I like to hang out with her because we have something in common. But let's say you meet someone and it seems like you have opposite personalities, you have different views about the world, you have different political views, you have different background. I mean, there's nothing that really is clear as to, wow, I could see why you're friends. But there are sometimes those moments where you meet someone and there's that sudden electric feeling and you're like, wow, I can't explain it, but I really connect with that person. That's what this first sentence is saying. Yeah. It happened to the two of us when we met at a psychology symposium. So, what happened? Our small talk during a break quickly gave way to, what does it mean to give way to? Playful theories about coffee drinkers. So they started talking during break, like, oh, hi, how are you? Like, what brought you to the conference? Oh, yeah, I've been working, da, 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 right? And so they were like, kind of introducing themselves. And then that quickly gave way to or led to talking about, I have this theory about coffee drinkers versus tea drinkers. So it means their conversation evolved, right? So it went from small talk or very light conversation introduction to something a little bit more meaningful and even playful. Does that make sense? When something gives way to, it means it allows more. It leads to more. We went to find seats together, unaware that this conversation, right, the little short conversation during the break, was the start of a decade-long collaboration and friendship. So, why does the author talk about oh, sorry, not author, authors talk about the first time they met? What do they want us to start thinking about? Meeting people, conversations, small talks, right? Is it easy or not? Who do you click with? Who do you not click with? Why? Because their whole essay is about conversations. So they're getting you warmed up. They want you to start thinking about, hey, we're going to be writing about conversations, small talks, but I want you to start thinking about who do you like to talk to? What makes conversations easy? What do you normally do when you meet someone for the first time? By introducing their own stories, that's what the readers are also thinking about. Ah, who is someone that I remember talking to for the first time and it was like really just magical? Or the opposite, who did I have a hard time really trying to connect to? Do you understand? So, if the authors made you do that much, they are very good writers in terms of writing hooks. Okay, let's keep going. Whoops. All right. Sorry. Hmm. Is this better? No, maybe here, like this. Okay. No, no. Yeah, this is better. Sorry. I was playing around with I was playing around with um the settings so that maybe it might be better for you. Where does that spark come from? Exactly. What makes someone feel like a lifelong friend after just a couple of minutes? People tend to assume it's similarity. What does similarity really mean? that they are especially likely to hit it off. What does it mean to hit it off with someone, right? Get along, become really close from the very beginning with someone who shares their background or personality trait. So we normally, most of us think when we get along with someone, when we hit it off with someone, it's because there's something similar about your personalities, your hobbies, something that's similar that says, ah, we have something in common. No wonder we get along. We hit it off. Does that make sense? That's what we normally think. Now, do do the researchers, do the authors think it's similarity that brings people close? Probably not. That's why they're writing this essay, right? Because it goes against what normal people think or what we have thought normally. We'll have to keep reading. But in our research, we found that many of the strongest bonds come less from existing similarity. So they don't think it's similarity, and more from riffing playfully. So what is this word riffing? Let's keep reading to find out more. In these moments, people create a little world that belongs just to them, a process we call building a shared reality. So let's say you and I have a conversation. As we are talking back and forth, we exchange ideas. What happens is we are creating a little shared reality that just belongs to us. So it's like a little space. Imagine yourself in a little bubble, and we are the only two people in that little bubble. And there's only something that we share and nobody else does. Does that make sense? So that's what they're saying, that when you have a conversation or when you are interacting with someone, there's a shared reality. So from the outside, if you're not part of that dialogue, if you're not part of that conversation, you probably don't know what is going on because you're not part of it. It's not shared. Does that make sense? Okay, so collaborative risks are surprisingly central to our mental well-being. So when you have these interactions and you create a shared reality with the people that you talk to, this is very important. It's central to our mental well-being. So, what they're saying is when you don't have these kind of interactions and you create shared realities with other people because you're engaging in conversations with them, it might be unhealthy if you don't have a lot of that. They're the glue that binds us together. What are they referring to? Collaborative riffs, right? So these conversations that we have with other people, right? um, Adds color to our lives and gives us a sense of purpose, right? So this is why they're saying this is central to our mental well-being. The authors are trying to explain what exactly mental well-being looks like. It binds us together so we don't feel alone. It adds color to our lives. It makes our lives more meaningful and exciting. And it gives a sense of purpose. Why am I here? Why do I need to exist? Right? And this is all connected to well-being. So do you see the little two dots here? This is called a colon. So when you see a colon, similar to a M dash, the author is going to try to define a concept, in this case, mental well-being, a little more specifically with details and examples. Does that make sense? So next time you see a colon, you could say, ah, this is the author's way of giving us more definition, more details, more information about what comes before the colon. Good? All right. And yet, our culture's conversational rituals revolve not around playful co-construction, which is what they want, what they are arguing for, but around exchanging formalities. Okay, so they think, the authors think, when you engage in a conversation or in a dialogue with another person or people, you are creating like a little world just for yourselves, right? That sounds more interesting than conversation, right? So when I'm talking to you, you and I are building a little private space just for us. Only we will understand what's going on, and other people that are outside our little bubble don't have a clue as to what's going on. So it kind of makes it exciting, right? It's like, oh, you know, I have somebody who understands me, right? And so that's what they think interacting is. And when you have this kind of interaction with other people, they're saying it's really good for you and your mental health, right? So that's their way of saying we like to see conversations that way. However, and yet, our cultural conversational rituals, so the way we have conversations, rituals means there's like a process or a system or a way of doing some things. So like when you have rituals when it comes to so for example, like when you have a funeral for someone who died, you have rituals. You have certain things that you do in certain steps and process, right? Those are rituals. Um, so the way things have been done in certain contexts is what rituals are. So when it comes to conversations, there's a way we do it, right? But they're saying traditionally, it doesn't revolve. It's not about playful co-construction where we are kind of building a small world of ourselves. But they're saying, but traditionally, it's exchanging formalities. So consider the small talk classic. Here's a very, very typical classic means it's very typical of here's a very typical example of a small talk. How was your weekend? Convention dictates you keep your answer brief and toss the question back. That's what we're taught. So probably you have heard in speaking classes or not, you have heard your instructor say, I don't know about if this is true in other cultures, but like at least here in the States, if somebody asks you, hey, how was your weekend? They're not really interested in exactly what went down and all the little details and drama that happened during your weekend. In fact, it's just a way of saying hi. That's it. So we teach you, don't give them all the details. Just say, great, how about yours? And then make it about them. Like ask them. Does that make sense? That's convention. That's what we've been taught because that's what has been done in most cases, usually from time to time, from generation to generation, right? So that's what conventions are. So convention dictates it takes control of um, how you're supposed to do these conversations. So what that means is if you do something else other than how's your weekend? Great, how about yours? Then you're kind of seen as weird, right? Because you're going against, you're defying convention, right? But they don't think the traditional way of doing small talk, like, hi, how's your weekend? Great. How about yours? They don't think this is good small talk. Do we get their argument? But they have to first explain what is going on, what has been done, so that they can say, this is wrong. We want to propose, we want to suggest, we want to argue for something else, something more meaningful. Does that make sense? So, step one is to explain to you what has been done, what is the norm before they start to argue or tell you about their opinions, right? Because people have to first know what the problem is. So when you're trying to argue, try to apply the same logic, right? So say, hey, before I tell you what I'm thinking, let me tell you about what the problem is. And you have to explain it because not everybody's going to be aware of what the actual problem is. Some people might not even think this is a problem. Does that make sense? So if you don't explain to your readers or your listeners, if this is a speaking task, and you just start talking about your own arguments and your own ideas, you're going to lose them. But when you first explain, here's what I think the problem is, then the listeners or the readers are going to be more in tune with what you're trying to say and be aware, oh, I didn't realize that was a problem. Or, yeah, I kind of had the same idea, but I didn't know exactly what the problem was. Or they could say, yeah, I am totally in agreement with you, right? Because you don't know who's reading your essay. You don't know who's listening to you. So you're first going to point out what the problem is. And in essays, you call this background information, right? And the essays that we're reading here don't quite look like the 5 paragraph essays that we've been asked to write, right? Your professors have always asked you, write in like introduction, body, 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 conclusion, or something like that, right? But the placement of the components, like a hook, background information, thesis statement, this is all here, even if it doesn't quite look exactly the same as the essays that we're used to writing. Does that make sense? But the way you argue is very similar. Does that make sense? So you have to understand why the author is introducing what's been done traditionally. What's the conventional, conventional rituals? What are the norms of what small talk is looks like, right? Okay, let's keep going. So convention dictates you keep your answer brief, toss the question back. Good. Just binge some Netflix, you. So you don't share too much. Just say, yeah, I binged some Netflix. What's binge? What's binge? So my husband and I, we like to watch shows that have Korean dramas usually that have finished, right? So the series are done. And so because we don't like to wait for the next week. We don't like to watch one episode and then wait one week to watch the next episode. So we wait until the show is over and then we download it all and then we binge, like we sit and watch 2 3 shows at a time. So binge means like you're eating a lot or you're watching something or you're doing something a lot in a very short amount of time. That's binge, right? Oh, so we just binged some Netflix. You? The conversation proceeds predictably. Took my dog to the park since it was so nice. There's nothing interesting about this conversation. That's the point they're trying to make. Oh, I have a dog too. What kind is yours? So the conversation seems very safe, right? Very safe. What is yours? A lab mix. He's 3. And then what do you do? I mean, there's nothing unpleasant about this, right? Both parties walk away with information, but still worlds apart. What did you find out about that person other than the fact that he has a lab, right? And then you have a dog. And what? Nothing. They might think they're playing it safe, but that safety traps them in connection, right? So yeah, it might be safe, but it didn't go anywhere. It didn't lead to anything. It was just kind of like, okay, bye. And then there's no more connection. Instead, if these 2 people strayed from the script, what is a script? Like a movie script, right? It's like what actors have to read and memorize to act in movies or TV shows, right? That's a script. But here it's trying to it's a synonym or it's a paraphrase from the conventional what is the word they used? Sorry, conventional rituals, right? The normal exchanges. But if you go away from it, stray means you're kind of like wandering off, like you're now following the script. So even though they use the word script, they're not really talking about a movie script, show, like a script for a show for actors. Here, they're trying to say the way conversations are taught to be done, which is the boring, conventional formality, exchanging of formalities, right? If you go away from it and riff off each other, and this is what they're trying to argue, they might begin to feel that electric buzz of being in sync. So let's say you don't do the nice, hey, how's your weekend? Good, just binged on Netflix. How about you? Oh, I took my dog to the park. Oh, you have a dog. What kind is your dog? A lab mix. Oh, he's 3. And then walk away. If you don't do this and you do something different, you stray from the script, you might feel that electric buzz of being in sync, right? So let's see what they want you to do instead of the boring, hi, how's your weekend? It's like being a kid again. Children skip the boring getting to know you phase and jump straight into pretend play, transforming into dragon slaying knights or shipwrecked sailors. So the other day, I was watching my son play at the playground, and it was so funny. He had never seen these kids. And the kids came up to him and they said, how old are you? And he said, I'm 5 or 5.5 or something like that. He said, okay. And then they started playing chase. It was so funny. They didn't have to like find out what his name was. They're like, okay, who's gonna be it? And then they started, and my son was selected. I don't think he knew what was going on, but he was selected to be it. And then they were just playing. They were running, screaming, and they were pretending that the slide was the castle, and my son was suddenly a monster, right? Because he was chasing them. It was so funny to watch them play. But that's all they needed, right? So they skip all of that and they start playing Dragon Slaying Knights or Shipwrecked Sailors. How was your weekend? Good, but I spent way too much time watching people make tiny food on TikTok, right? Because, I mean, let's face it, if somebody said to me, or I told somebody I watched TikTok and I was watching all these like cat videos, some people might think I'm crazy, right? Right? But let's say I came to you and said, I watched people make little tiny miniature foods on TikTok, and it was just so interesting. So I kept watching and watching and watching. And the other person said, oh, why? Then the conversation doesn't go anywhere, right? But let's say the other person said, whoa, you mean like doll-sized food? And they jump in and they be part of this conversation, it makes the dialogue a lot more interesting, right? And safe. It feels safe to be kind of crazy. And the first person says, "Yes, if you want to learn to make a lasagna in a bottle cap, let me know. I can send you all the videos." That's hilarious. We could organize a tiny food potluck. Like you make a little lasagna, I make little croissants, like and fit the entire spread on this coaster. You know what a coaster is, right? For your coffee mugs and teacups, right? Let's say imagine that's a table and you try to put a little dinner table together with like tiny food. Huh? And we need tiny furniture too. Should we ask that guy over there wearing Carhartt to build it? So suddenly they're kind of being like kids, but they're also being imaginative, right? Because they are trying to say, what if we had a potluck party, but it was for dolls? Or the food is like doll size, right? And so it's almost like being a kid again when you talk this way, right? All right, let's continue with paragraph 6.